Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Highland Park Public Library's Shelf Isolation, a Readers Roundtable mini-series about books, cultures, and what to read next. I'm Sarah, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. Today, we are super excited to bring you an episode about what we've been reading, watching, and/or listening to during our self-isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to our Readers Roundtable expert and moderator, Michelle.
Hello. So I'm going to start. So the first book that I read was called The Ghosts of Eden Park. It's by Karen Abbott. It's a nonfiction book, and I listened to it. And it is the true crime story of the bootlegger George Remus and the two women that kind of took him down. He was called the king of the bootleggers. He went out of Cincinnati. He built his bootlegging empire, and then he met a woman, and then she kind of took him down. It's a really interesting nonfiction read. It's very, reads like fiction. Her other books are also really great. So I really enjoyed that one. So the next one was another nonfiction. It's called Accidental Presidents. It's the 8 Men Who Changed America, and it's by Jared Cohen. It is about the 8 men who became president without being voted in, and it tells how they became vice presidents, how they became presidents, and how they did or did not change America. And I thought it was really interesting. So it is about John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, Chester Arthur, Theodore Roosevelt, Calvin Coolidge, Harry Truman, and Lyndon B. Johnson. So it's a really great nonfiction read if you like knowing about presidents and accidental presidents. And lastly, I just finished yesterday, Evvie by Linda Holmes, which was one of our 2019 staff recommends books. So hopefully you've read it. It is about a woman named Evvie Drake who is kind of at a standstill in her life. Her much beloved doctor husband passed away a year ago, and she's kind of trying to start her life over when she takes an attendant, which is Dean Tenney, who was a former major league pitcher who just stopped being able to pitch. And it's kind of about them starting their lives over and falling in love. So that's really great. All right.
Okay, so I'm Laurie. I also work in the Information and Reader Services Department. And so I've been reading The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. It's the third book in the Wolf Hall trilogy. The first two won the Man Booker Prize. And they tell the story of Thomas Cromwell, who was he was like his fixer. And he's the one that got rid of Catherine and got rid of, Anne Boleyn. And this one starts with Anne Boleyn's beheading. Not very far in it, I would like to point out, but it's 795 pages. It's really interesting. And I think that it has been made into a series on some channel. Anyway, so that's really good. If you want, you might want to start with Wolf Hall, which I haven't checked, but it might be available on Overdrive because it's an older book. And then a book that I've been listening to, which I heard about from an article I read, is called To Bless the Space Between Us by John O'Donoghue, who is an Irish poet and philosopher. This is kind of different for me because it's more inspirational. I don't usually read inspirational things, but I downloaded it on Hoopla, so anyone can get it. And I'm listening to it as an audiobook here. I don't know if you could see this. And it's like a series of short essays on different topics like changes in your life or, birth or, different things. And then he has prayers, but they're kind of non-sectarian prayers. They're not any specific religion. And he has a very lovely voice, so it's nice to listen to that. It's only 4 hours long. And then the third thing that I read recently was an article in the New Yorker, which is available on RB Digital. So you can log into RB Digital and read the New Yorker. And this is an article by Jill Lepore, who wrote the Jane Franklin, wrote another one called Joe Gould's Teeth. And it's about the census and the history of censuses in general and why filling out your census, which you can do now that you're home, it doesn't take long at all, is so important. So these are some things I've been reading. I did read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which I believe everyone has read but me, and that was good. I really did enjoy that. Here's that one. So that's what I've been reading lately or listening to. And now I'm going to pass it off to Chad.
Hello, everybody. Okay, those were great suggestions, Laurie. My list is growing bigger now. But yeah, so I mostly want to talk about things I'm listening and watching to, but I will start with a book that I finished recently, Everything Must Go by Kevin Koval. It's a poetry book. I don't read a lot of poetry, so it was a little different for me. I really enjoyed it. For those who don't know Kevin Koval, he's a local, grew up in and around Chicago. This book is about poems written about Wicker Park, a neighborhood in Chicago where he kind of came of age. It takes place in the mid-90s. He moves there because he learns that his family is from the area. His grandfather came from Poland, and they first his family lived in like a one-room apartment in Wicker Park. So he ends up going to Wicker Park when he's like 18. So a lot of the poems and the prose, I guess you would call it, is about that time, like in the 90s, and he's thinking about where he came from, and also gentrification is happening. You know, he can see like the big restaurants are starting to come in, and things are changing. It's really interesting. It kind of acts as a graphic novel too. It's collaborated with author Langston Alston. So the graphics that kind of go with the prose are really interesting. It's a heartbreaking book too. It's kind of, he's down and out for, a lot of his, I guess through his 20s. I mean, the book starts when he's about 18, and towards the end of it, I think he's like almost turning 30. So he's collected these poems. He wrote them, between like 95 and 2001, I think. But it's really good. You can find it in the library catalog. Highly recommend it. I also wanted to talk about what I was been watching, which it's freely available on the internet, and I believe we have copies too at the library, even though those are a bit off interested, not accessible at the moment. But if you go out to pbs.org, American Master Series, which a lot of people have probably heard of, they came out with Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. It's fantastic. It's a great documentary about Miles Davis. Spans his whole career, which was 6 decades. Starts out, he went to Juilliard, then it talks about how he put John Coltrane in all the different phases. He was very Miles Davis, and I learned a lot about Miles Davis. He shifted. He was a shapeshifter. He never really stuck with one kind of way to express himself on his instrument. It's a really well done documentary. Highly recommend it. It's just under 2 hours, pbs.org. You can find it there. Which leads me to what I'm listening to. During the social distancing, a lot of music, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians aren't able to play their concerts. So we've been seeing a lot of musicians taking their live shows and putting them online. So there's been really some terrific online concerts happening. Some of them you can actually tip the musicians. There's like an electronic tip jar. There's some fascinating stuff. One that stuck out for me is the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. They're streaming all their concerts online, but they also have a channel on a platform called Twitch where they're actually showing you how they compose the music and can follow along. They came out with a long, so you're seeing like how they rehearse and how they build the music, and then actually how they play it too. You're witnessing a concert. Really good stuff. There's another place in Chicago, in Andersonville, called the Experimental Sound Studio, and they're doing a Monday and Friday afternoon concerts where they're streaming musicians out of their home. It's called the Quarantine Concerts, and it's again, I'll share the link. It's really good stuff. Each concert's about an hour, and it's a different musician playing music from their home and then streaming it out on this platform. Another place in London is doing this too. It's called Cafe Odo. Again, they're bringing musicians together, and we're also connected. I'll share those links. That's all I have. Mostly listening. One really good book, and I'm going to pass it over to Catherine.
Yes, hi. So I've been reading a lot since I've been staying home, which is great for me. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. So this is a book that is actually written in the form of a screenplay, and it's kind of experimental. Our protagonist is Willis Wu, who sounds a little bit like Charles Yu, who is an actor who's tired of playing generic Asian man and is hoping to work his way up to Kung Fu guy. And it really just takes on Asian American stereotypes head on, particularly within Hollywood, but in general. And as we go along within the screenplay, we sort of start to realize that even outside of the screenplay, things are a little weird. Like the character's background is a little cardboard. So I really like this because it was experimental, but it's also pretty easy to read. It's not one of those experimental novels that is really dense that you can't figure out at all. So this one was a fun one to read, but also really an important book as we talk about the Own Voices movement. I mean, this is a great entry into that. The next book that I finished is The Arab of the Future, Volume 4. I know that Chad is also a fan of this series. If you haven't read any of them, start with Volume 1, but it's an ongoing memoir by Riyad Sattouf, and it's about his childhood growing up in the Middle East and in France. His mother is French, his father is Syrian, and the title, The Arab of the Future, is basically what his father sort of declared himself to be. His father is kind of this wacky, eccentric character. But as the books go on, his parents' marriage becomes more and more antagonistic. And I think this one was really the best entry of the 4. They were all good, but this one unfortunately ends on a cliffhanger. So I am desperately waiting for the next one to be written. Sattouf writes in French. He's based in Paris, but we have to wait for each volume to be translated into English, which seems to be happening a little bit more quickly now, but I don't think the next one is even out in French, so I'm really, really frustrated about that. Hopefully Riyad Sattouf is at home writing it right at this moment. He's probably asleep in France, but as soon as he wakes up, I want him to get to his desk and start writing. And the last book I'm going to talk about is the book of Evvie by Anna Solomon. This one is not out yet. It comes out in May. This is the advanced reading copy from the publisher that we got at the library. This is sort of a riff on the story of Esther and Vashti, and it follows 3 different women, Esther herself, and then in 1970s, Washington, D.C. and Massachusetts, a woman named Evvie, who's the wife of a U.S. senator, and then Lily, who is a mother in present-day Brooklyn. It really draws upon a lot of famous women authors like Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Marilyn French, and it's not that you've had to have read all those authors to enjoy this book. I mean, it's a page-turner in its own right, but I just really loved it as an entry in women's fiction, and in the end, the story came together in a way that I didn't quite expect. Maybe that's just me. I never see the obvious ending coming, but but it was still just a really good story, and I think that it's going to have wide appeal when it comes out. So, okay, who is next?
I believe it is me. Yes. I am also reading outside of my genre this period of time, and I am reading Evie Dunmore's Bringing Down the Duke at the moment. This is a romance novel, which is not usually my, again, cup of tea, but I'm reading it with my romance book club as I try to break into the genre. It is really funny and really good. It's a historic novel, and it is exactly what the title says, Bringing Down the Duke. And our lead protagonist is really a strong lead female character. It's not going to appeal to the people who are the 100% history must be history, but anybody who wants a light read that is quippy, that has humor, that has characters who are developed outside of the main romance plot, it's a really good book. I'm really enjoying it, and there's a sequel coming out later this year, so I'm looking forward to that. In addition to Bringing Down the Duke, I just finished rewatching the Witcher series for probably the 7th time on Netflix. So I started reading the books, and I started with The Last Wish by Sapkowski. It turns out this is actually a novella, not the first book in the series, although I do now have that. It's Blood of Elves, but I'm really enjoying this. It is originally translated from Polish, and the English translation is just phenomenal. I would never have known that this was originally in Polish. Also, the author, I've read a few interviews with him, the book is so funny in certain times and just so well done, and it also comes through the author interview, so it's really great. And then speaking of other things, I am listening to a lot of the Rewatchables podcast, which is great because it's usually a solid hour of content and gets me through my commute back and forth to work, and now it's just earworm pleasure. But their premise is that they rewatch great movies like Ocean's 11, The Godfather, or Jurassic Park, up to name really just a few of the most recent ones. And then they talk about it and discuss like insider secrets and what have you. And then along that vein, I am rereading Michael Crichton, who is a Chicago-born native, his Jurassic Park series, because I just went listened to the Jurassic Park rewatchables. And as Michelle and probably anybody who shares an office with me knows, I really love Jurassic Park, and just rereading the book is a joy, and I never get bored of it. So I'm going to transfer this over now to, I believe, Lisa.
Okay, I'm Lisa. I'm also a member of Information Reader Services, and I just read Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefwafer at the recommendation of Michelle, and I really, really liked it. It's about a girl named Blue who is part of a sort of psychic family, and she's the only one in her family that doesn't seem to have psychic powers. She just kind of boosts psychic powers around her, and every one of her psychic family members has said she can't kiss her true love or they'll die. And just kind of the surrounding stuff that happens with that, and a group of male friends from a nearby boys' school, and the sort of fantasy stuff that happens around that. And I really, really, really like the descriptive language the author uses. It's so good and funny. I'm really, really enjoying that. And then I'm also reading The Hitchhiker's Guide, which is funny in a different way. And I'm really, really liking that. I can see why it's a classic. There's so many jokes, so much layered material there. It's absolutely the sort of thing I'm probably going to reread like 5 times. And then as far as listening goes, I have really been enjoying PBS Eons. It's YouTube podcast thing about a lot of dinosaurs, some just evolutionary history. I think it was started by the Green brothers, John and Hank Green, and that's really good. It's really informative. It's a nice thing to have on in the background where you're doing something. I watch it while I knit, because one of the things I decided to do during quarantine is finish a giant queen-size blanket I started years ago that has a million mistakes, because before this started, I also read Vogue Knitting Stittionary, and that was immensely helpful. I don't have it with me because I returned it before quarantine started, but that was really, really good and a great resource. So maybe I stand a chance at finishing this, not correctly because that's too far gone for that. But I can call those things style choices. So that's my stance, and I'm sticking with it. I'm also just doing sort of general art projects to keep myself occupied. I took some watercolors that I got for Christmas months ago and was like, you know what? What if I try Easter eggs? I don't know. What else can I do? Can I draw a swamp monster? Sure, let's try that. Just little projects to keep myself busy, and of course, lots of dog walks. And with that, I am going to pass it on to Gus
And his
All right.
assistant.
So I have, it's me and my best buddy here, Maria. I'm going to talk about a book that I just read. It's called Savage Appetites. It is a true crime book that I thought was really good. It's about 4 women who were not criminals themselves, but they were intrigued by true crime and kind of were obsessed about true crime. And like, for example, like one of them she's like the mother of forensic science or something like that. I forgot her name. I don't have the book with me. I mean, this is kind of what it looks like. It's by Rachel Monroe. Also, another one was another woman who was obsessed with some kind of criminal killer or something like that she ended up marrying him in jail. It's crazy. It's a fascinating book, pretty quick read, and I'm kind of into that stuff. You got to really be into true crime I'm not, that's not my only genre or anything like that, but I do like it from time to time, and this one was pretty good. The next one I'm gonna read is called American Predator. I literally, right before we started this, I downloaded it on audio, so I'm gonna be listening to that, and that's by Maureen Callahan. That came out, I think, last year, and it's another true crime book about one of the worst serial killers in the last like century or something like that. So I've not read that yet, but that's the next one on my list. Also during this time, I have been playing games, and here is a fantastic game called Animal Crossing. I know it looks like it's for 5 and under, but it's not. It is a really good game. I've been playing with my kids as well. And it's one of those games where it's like a life simulator. You just kind of do random things like you can go fishing, you could, you make a house, catch bugs. I know it doesn't sound that interesting right now, but when you play it, it's really, really fun. I'll tell you that. Also, I've been playing one of the scariest games of all time. Okay, it's not for the lighthearted. It's Luigi's Mansion 3. Another great game. My kids like it. Maria, do you like it?
Yeah.
See, okay. And my other daughter, Sophia, she likes it too. So they both give it a thumbs up. Also, since we're here, Maria is going to recommend a book she's reading. I can read with my eyes shut. My eyes shut.
No, I can read with my eyes shut.
Yeah, that's by Dr. Seuss. So, if any kids out there listening, that's kind of what I've been doing. Aaron, you go.
Okay, thanks. What I would like to recommend is a book called Kitchen Yarns by Anne Hood, which I read in digital form shortly before the libraries closed. And it's a book of essays that talk about her life and her experiences, sometimes happy, interesting, sometimes tragic, but every chapter or every essay includes a recipe. And it just held my interest for a long time. I didn't read through all the recipes, but I was inspired, as I say, shortly before we closed, to go to the library and get the Silver Palette cookbook. Anyway, that's not my usual sort of cookbook. I usually gravitate towards the 5 ingredients or less, or the fix it and forget it sort of thing. But I did try a very simple carrot recipe that I really liked from this cookbook. And to top it off, it's available on Hoopla. I'm not going to be hogging the book and keeping it from everybody unless you insist on the hard copy. That I've got here until we reopen. But anyhow, I was really happy. I'd never looked into this cookbook before, but it was nice. So also for my just before bed reading, I have begun The Huntress on Kindle number 2, and I'm really enjoying that, by Kate Quinn. It's about World War II. For those who don't want to read about World War II, I wouldn't recommend it, but I really am enjoying it. Next, I think, is Sarah.
Yes, hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to my sewing room. So I've just finished The Bookish Life of Nina Hill on audio. It was very good. Main character works in an independent bookstore. There's a romantic comedy element when she falls for a guy in a rival trivia team called You're a Quizzard, Harry. I definitely recommend it for anyone who likes books about people who like books. Would be great for anybody who's read Evvie Drake. Definitely recommend. I've also been reading the Virgin River series after watching the Netflix show. And I wanted to mention them because they are all on Hoopla. So no waiting. They're not amazing, but they're fun. And I just read a few chapters before bedtime every night. And I'm on book 11 now, having started at the beginning of the year. I also have the Jane Austen Society. I brought the ARC home from work. I'm not very far into it so far, but it's really good, and it's recommended for fans of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which I quite enjoyed a couple years ago. This comes out in May, so you can put it on hold now. And finally, I have cookbooks. If anybody follows Allison Roman on Instagram or Twitter, she's kind of being known as the chef of the pandemic because her recipes use a lot of pantry ingredients. So we this week made her salmon with soy and citrusy charred scallions, which is quite easy and delicious. And I have previously made, this is definitely a recommended during a pandemic recipe, the cookies. These went viral on Instagram a couple years ago as the cookies, and they're a shortbread chocolate chip, very good. And these are my copies. I don't have the library ones out, but of course the library owns them, but the library's closed. But a lot of her recipes are available from New York Times or Bon Appetit websites. So I definitely recommend the cookies or the stew, which she is also known for. So that's mine, and I'll pass it over to Beth.
Hi. Hello. I am recommending a vintage cookbook called Kids Cooking. It's published in 1987. I bought this at the Brandeis used book sale, if anybody remembers this, from years ago when my kids were little, but I'm still using it today. Like Sarah, I have become a fan of their chocolate chip cookie recipe, which I think is better than the one that appears on the bag of chocolate chip cookies. So I have the ingredients, so we can do this one of these days at home with me and my children. I just wanted to point out that it's a good way to pass time. You have to be very careful, of course, to practice safe food skills as we now know, hand washing before you undertake any cooking. It's a good way to connect with your kids if you are trying to keep them off their computer or off a device, and to use things that you may have readily available in your kitchen. And that is it.
Perfect. Miss Stephanie, take the wheel.
Yeah, I'm actually here. Hi there. Hey, so I was going through old magazines and I found a February 2019 Southern Living, and I decided they had bars, so I guess that's why I decided to keep it for bar cookies. And I made this brown butter brownie cookie. So I baked it. It says that it takes an hour and 40 minutes from start to finish. They lie. It took about 2 hours. A lot of having to wait 30 minutes for this and that. And anyway, so when I took it out of the oven, my husband said, okay, it doesn't look like the picture. So this is what it ended up looking like. Very, very good though. Everyone liked it. You can't go wrong when a recipe calls for 3 sticks of butter. So anyway, it was delicious. And the 2 other people that are here to review things, my husband and Sam, both said it was very good. So then onto a book. I listened to this audiobook, The Silent Patient. It was really, really good. I did not figure it out. It's a story that follows Theo Faber, and then I think her name is Alicia Berenstein. And she, at the beginning of the story, is arrested for murdering her husband. Then she becomes silent, and Theo is her psychoanalyst, and he's trying to get her to talk and find out what happened. Had lots of twists and turns, and did not figure it out at all. I highly recommend it. It's probably better to read though, because I think with the twists and things, sometimes you don't get that from the narrator who is reading the story to you versus actually turning the pages. But I did sit in my driveway a number of times listening for the next thing that was going to happen. And I only have 2 things, so that's it with me.
Oh, next is Ms. Nancy.
Hi.
Even though I'm an archivist and I deal primarily with primary materials, I recently read this recently published book by Sarah Abbott, who is a figure skater, an Olympic figure skater, world and European medalist. And this is a relevant book because it's part of the Me Too movement. It's now part of the library. There's a wait list for it already. In addition to, it's not a happy story in the sense that she writes about being abused by her coach from a very young age. And it also provides a window into what it's like to be a young sports person, where you're going to camps and homeschooling with other artists. And short book, about 200 pages. I printed this out from Goodreads because I donated it to the library after I read it. Whatever your level in French, is not a high level of French required to read it, but it's important part of the Me Too movement. It had a great impact, in France, in that it caused an uproar, and that's been a problem here too with abuse, with these kids really ambitious and known to turn to it, being abused by their coaches. So I highly recommend it. I used to work as a translator, so maybe I'll translate it. Great book and great part of the Me Too movement, understanding how women are speaking up even 30 years later. So in addition to this, my primary materials, I am reading, I printed this out for my printers, a lot of opera programs. And while I was resisting while I was at the workplace, I'm now indulging and sometimes listening to operas that I'm not familiar with. That one thing, after you capture something, you have to convert the text. it has to be proof, especially older text where it's kind of jumbled. So I'm reading a lot of interesting ads and programs and opera synopses and listening to those long lost operas that always seem to be somewhere on YouTube, which is great fun. That's it. Thank you.
That sounds absolutely beautiful, Nancy. Just all this opera in your life. Well, okay, that is it for today, folks. As always, we are available for comments, questions, and any concerns you may have. You can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/HPLibrary, through our Twitter, which is @HPLibrary, or by email at hppla@hplibrary.org. You can also find this information online or through our website, which is hplibrary.org. Our intro music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more information about it and our show notes in the episode information down below. And okay, everybody, this is us signing off. Until we see you next, travel safe, and bye, everyone.
Bye.